Hey guys, welcome to Cinema Waali Baate, that talks about cinema with me, Cinephile Sanket. So for today's episode, I have Mike McCahill. Mike sir is a film critic, and you might have watched him in my last recommendation video, talking about films like Run Lola Run. Today I'll be chatting with him and having a conversation about film criticism and cinema in general. Do check it out. Hello, sir. Hello, Mike, sir. Welcome to Cinema Wali Baate, that talks about cinema. What have you been watching? Which films or TV show have been watching recently?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. What have I been watching? I've been watching a lot. Obviously, lockdown has been great for sort of catching up on stuff. But I've been having to do sort of little bits of work here and there. So I have a TV column for the Reader's Digest, which I do every month, and I've just filed because we work 2 months in advance. I've just filed my March copy, which is going to be about all based on the theme of. I like to try and have a theme for every column. And this month's theme is going to be or March's theme is going to be on homeschooling, which is what a lot of parents are doing here at the moment, because obviously a lot of the schools are shut down. But it's going to be about homeschooling for parents. So I've been writing about Mark Kermode's history of cinema. Are you aware of Mark Kermode's work?
No. Can you name anything he has
So
done?
Mark is like the number one most trusted critic in the UK. There have been polls taken, and the public trusts Mark's recommendations with their
Wow.
life. He's a thoroughly lovely human being and a very great critic. And he has a series on BBC Four over here where every week he takes a different genre. So he's done an episode on the horror genre, on rom-coms, on musicals, and he just sort of analyzes the structure of those films and the common tropes, the films that have tried to do something different within that form. And so his new series is running on BBC Four as we speak, and it has had episodes on British comedy and the pop musical. And there's an episode next week about cult movies, which is kind of Mark's wheel yard. It's his. No one in this country knows more about cult movies than Mark and Kim Newman, who writes the scripts, who's another very good British critic. And so I'm sort of raving about that because those shows are brilliant in terms of they're as good a film studies class as you could want to enroll on. So in terms of the variety of the clips and the way those clips are put together, it's just as a way into cinema. It's a great experience, and also just watching it as someone who's seen a lot of films, even that there are clips of films that I haven't seen and that are new to me. So it's constantly introducing good things. So this month, so for March, I'm doing that, and I'm doing History of Swear Words on Netflix, which has obviously been a sort of a brief thing.
The show hosted by Nicolas Cage, right?
Nicolas Cage, yeah, exactly, yeah, hamming it up in true Nicolas Cage fashion, and also Pretend It's a City, which is the Martin Scorsese, Fran Lebowitz show, which has just emerged on Netflix, which is kind of like I'm giving that as a sort of treat to parents after they've educated themselves. They can have a bit of time off and watch Martin Scorsese laughing at Fran Lebowitz. So that's March's TV done. This week I start on April's TV column, and I'm doing an international sort of roundup. So it'll be Lupin, the new version of Arsène Lupin, which is on Netflix, starring Omar Sy, which I gather Netflix it's doing great numbers on Netflix.
Oh yeah, the I think he was previously starred in a film called The Untouchables, right?
Untouchable, yes, yeah. That's the one. So he's got his own TV series now, and I gather it's doing great numbers on Netflix. They're very happy with that. Here in the UK, we've got a new Danish crime drama called The Investigation starting this week, which is by a director called Thomas Lindholm, who did a hijacking. A hijacking, which is one of the best thrillers of the last 10 years. He's moved into TV, and he's doing this The Investigation, which is based on the true story of the journalist who went missing and turned up murdered after she went and met a guy on a submarine. It's about the investigation into that whole case, which turned into a more convoluted story than I think people were expecting. And finally, on TV front, Tandav. I'm going to start watching that this week, which I know there's been a bit of controversy, and I'm hoping to see it before it gets pulled off Amazon or
Which
it
one?
gets
Can you repeat it?
Tandav, the with Saif Ali Khan.
Tandav. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's my pronunciation. My pronunciation,
it's okay.
as
It's okay.
always,
With all
terrible.
the accent, it
Yeah, yeah,
happens.
yeah, yeah.
But
So
yeah,
how would you say it? You're saying Tandav?
Tandav. So it is
Tandav. All
Tandav,
right.
and actually, I have watched it just the day when it got released.
Oh, so you've done it all. You've watched it all already.
I have watched it all. Yeah, yeah. But like, I didn't quite like that. I don't know why, but like, it wasn't for me.
Okay.
It was a good attempt on being a political, showing a political side of Indian politics, showing the prime minister's office and all that stuff, which the Hollywood films and TV shows does in shows of The West Wing and House of Cards. But like they tried to do it, but like I think it didn't work out for me quite well. But it was a thriller in the initial episode, but like it kind of a downfall for me. But I didn't like that much.
Okay, well, I will give it a try and see what I think. I have heard some mixed things about it, so we shall see. But that's on the agenda for TV. I mean, in terms of movies, it's a busy time as well because we're deep into award season now. The London Film Critics Circle, of which I am a member,
Wow.
we've announced our nominations for this year's awards last week, and we're voting on our nominations this Sunday. So I'm frantically catching up on those movies that we've nominated, but which I haven't seen yet. So last week I saw Nomadland and
Wow.
Sound of Metal.
Wow.
And both of those I think are as good as you've possibly heard because
I know, no, no. Like I
yeah,
personally, I loved Nomadland. So like, I haven't seen The Sound of Metal yet, but like, I just loved Nomadland. And like, yeah, continue. Yeah, I was just cutting you out.
no, I was going to say. I mean, I think it absolutely deserves all the praise that it's had. And I was less keen. I don't know if you saw Chloe Zhao's previous film, The Rider, which I know a lot of critics were like wild about. I was a little bit less keen on it because I thought the non-professionals weren't particularly convincing for a start. I think the performances weren't particularly good in that movie. I think it looks gorgeous, and I think that sort of pulled me through it. But here at No Man Land, because everything's organised around Frances McDormand, who is doing that sort of indomitable Frances McDormand character that nothing's going to knock her down or send her off course. And it is just beautiful, and Chloe Zhao has sort of honed that naturalism that she deals in. So you don't really know where the documentary stops and the drama starts, or whether the non-professionals and the cast end and the professionals take it up. I thought just as a piece of cinema, it's a really beautiful experience.
True that actually, like personally speaking, when I watched the film, I was shocked that the filmmakers used the actual nomads, which were like traveling in Las Vegas and Nevada state in general. And like I was just blew away about the cinematography. It was just awesome. Like I haven't seen songs that my brother taught me. The Chloe Zhao's debut movie and the next feature, The Rider. But like I was pretty good excited because it won the Golden Lion Award at the Venice Film Festival, and also like I was just when I watched it, I blew away, and even also. Minari, which I saw just before Nomadland. It is also a very personal story and also a very a good film. So, have you watched that film, Minari?
No, Minari is so we've nominated it in our foreign language film category. So that's on my pile of things to watch. My stack of screeners is just over my left, right shoulder, whatever side we are. So Minari is on that, and I'm hoping to watch that by Sunday. But I hear amazing things about it. I mean, the amazing thing is that this is the year where Netflix have just pushed all their money. They bet big on big end of year awards titles, and actually it may well end up being a Minari or a Nomadland that wins Best Picture. So I think the powers that be at Netflix are going to be kicking themselves that they spent as much money as they did on films that might miss out on the top prizes. But we'll see. Who knows? I mean, award season is a crazy time at the best of times.
So, we are talking about you are part of the London Film Critics Association. So, talking about film critics, how did you start your journey in film criticism? How did you start your journey right from your first review till now? You are the Guardian film critic. So, what was your journey about? How
So,
was
I
your
mean,
journey?
I didn't know. I knew that I wanted to be a journalist all along. I wasn't quite sure what field of journalism that I wanted to go into. And actually, through most of my teenage years, I think I expected that I would become a sports journalist. I was playing sport and I was watching sport, and I did my work experience on a local newspaper on the sports desk there. But I think there was just a point in my mid to late teens where I ended up going to the movies more on a Saturday afternoon than I did going to watch the football or something like that. So something just clicked in my mind, and I ended up studying film at university. And after that, I started writing. I mean, I was always sort of scribbling notes on film down in various notebooks from a very early age. And I just sort of kept up when after doing 3 years of film at university, I came away and did some reviews for various websites because I am so old. This was like the very early days of the internet, before you were born, quite possibly. And then I got a call from a friend who was doing theatre reviews for the Scotsman newspaper, which is Scotland's national newspaper. And she said they were looking for someone to do film reviews down in London because the way things work in the UK, there are press screenings dotted around the country, but not every film that gets screened in, say, Scotland or in Edinburgh or Glasgow or Liverpool or the north of England gets shown. Not every film that gets shown in London gets shown in those other cities. So the Scotsman needed someone to be down in London to cover those sort of remaining films that the studios weren't willing to screen up in Glasgow or Edinburgh. And so I submitted a bunch of reviews, and they said, "Oh, great! Can you go down to London to watch the new Steven Seagal film?" And lo and behold, that was. I mean, by and large, when a studio screens a film in London but doesn't bother screening it around the rest of the country, it's usually a sign that it's not a very good film. And this was the case with the Steven Seagal film in question. But that
Which
was
was
my
that
first.
film?
So it was Half Past Dead, which is I think Steven Seagal in prison, if I remember rightly. And it got 2 stars in the Scotsman, and I'm sure there are people who say that's far too generous. But it was my first review. It was the first time writing anything professionally. And from then on out, it was just a matter of I was going to press screenings in London. I was meeting other people who were doing the same job. There was like a little gang of us, sort of young critics who just entered the profession at the same time. So myself, Tim Roby, who's now one of the lead critics for the Telegraph, Catherine Shord, who is in fact my boss now at the Guardian. She is film editor. We would sort of gather together, sit together at screenings, and we'd go to lunch and we'd discuss the movies that we'd seen. And through that, I started writing for excuse me, Sunday Telegraph. When Catherine was writing for the Sunday Telegraph, she said, "I'm going off on holiday for a couple of weeks. Could you fill in for me?" I said, "Oh, sure, fine, great." And that's how I began my sort of allegiance with the Telegraph. And much the same thing happened when Catherine moved across to the Guardian. She wanted me to do some reviews for the Guardian. And it's just been a sort of slow, steady accumulation of work and things to do and money in the bank, thankfully. Just sort of slowly building stuff up, I think.
But you have done film criticism in I think 20 years, 20 plus years maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
So
I'm that old.
yeah, in the past 20 plus years, you have been reviewing films. So have you faced any backlash about a film review you have written? For example, you have given this film this much rating if it's not a good film for the public in general, but you liked it, so or vice versa. So have you faced any backlash as such?
Oh, constantly. I mean, it happens all the time. I mean, because criticism is an opinions game. You and I might have very different opinions on the same film.
Yeah.
and ideally you'd be able to just sit down and talk it out in a very sort of friendly, approachable way. But I think social media is so it it allows complete strangers to come at you in various with various levels of intensity. So this happens all the time. I think that the first big sort of social media, and sometimes there are things behind it. It's not just that you've written a review of that film and you haven't liked that film particularly. Sometimes there are strange forces going on behind the sort of social media pylon. So the first time that I ever had sort of real pushback online was when I reviewed a faith movie coming out of America called God's Not Dead, which is, a sort of born-again Christian movie. It's not terribly dramatically accomplished, and I reviewed it as such in The Guardian. And there was an immediate pile-on. And what had happened, I think it's someone who was sort of connected with the film, had read the review and obviously disagreed with it, and, pushed people my way online, because obviously I'm out there on Twitter and Facebook or, wherever. And so, it sort of became, I became the sort of poster boy for heathen, non-Christian ways. But you sort of brush it off, I guess. I mean, Tenet last year, there was a big sort of pushback over that, because I wrote one of the first reviews of Tenet, which was published on IndieWire, the American website, because it was not press screened in America. It was press screened over here in London.
Which film? Tenet.
Chris Nolan's Tenet.
Oh, Tenet. Okay.
Yeah. Again, it says Tandav Tenet. It's my pronunciation. But there was a huge pump because people were so sort of worked up about that and so enthusiastic. And actually, any review that said, well, "Hang on a minute," or it wasn't even like I was sort of massively dead against it. I just wasn't as overwhelmed by it as I think people wanted to be. And it's very, a lot of what we do is not black and white. It's dealing in the sort of shades of grey, that a film is not necessarily a masterpiece or a disaster. It's somewhere in between. And I think the hype machine is so intense nowadays that people are I mean, the thing with Tenet was that it was going to be the film that saved cinema, the film that saved the summer or whatever. And it's almost like there are very few films that could live up to that hype. And certainly I didn't feel that Tenet was a film that was sort of worthy of that tag. And so, some people come at you in a sort of friendly, jovial way, and, and that's all kind of good fun. That's exactly the sort of interaction that you want to have on social media. But there were genuinely people. There was one guy who said, I'm going to fly over and punch you. I was like, oh. Which is, over a film review, over a slight, over a difference of opinion. But like you say, and I think Nolan in particular has this very loyal fan base that everything he does in their eyes, he can do no wrong. Everything he touches turns to gold. And I think anything that was slightly skeptical, they were not going to like. But I don't know if I'd fly halfway around the world just to punch someone because I disagree with them. It seems like a hell of a lot of effort.
Yeah, actually, it happened not to me. Like, I'm not a film critic, but when I was discussing Dunkirk with my friends, that I said that I didn't quite like his film compared to his previous works, such as The Prestige and the other works such as Interstellar. Well, I didn't quite like Dunkirk, but I faced criticism that oh, okay, you are not you're not at liberty to say that and all that stuff. Oh, Nolan only makes the good stuff and all that. But I know, but all filmmakers have their ups and downs. I felt that Dunkirk was his down, and it happens. It is not compulsory to make to a filmmaker to make every film a masterpiece. It happens.
Yeah, I think so, and I think there's this weird sort of polarization going on generally. Politically, people are in a sort of either or camp right now, and everyone's shouting at one another, and that's one of the reasons why the world's got so noisy in recent years. But I think this idea that certain filmmakers are untouchable, that their films are beyond criticism, that that's a really dangerous idea. And I have my own directorial favorites, but even the directors that I like. I adore the works of Paul Thomas Anderson in general. But the last 2 or 3 films of his, I I'm not entirely, I'm certainly less keen on Phantom Thread than a lot of people are. I feel like, I like the Master very much, but I feel like he's withdrawing from the world rather than going out into it, which I think was one of the joys of his first movies, that they were so heart on sleeve. And I think, he's sort of guarding himself. So I'm going to write a review from that perspective. And that's not to say that I'm saying that Paul Thomas Anderson is a terrible filmmaker or that he's a bad person or anything like that, that it's a personal attack on the people who go see these movies and enjoy those movies. But everything gets very sort of heated and personal. And I think in part because Twitter never really has any filter on it. You can just, within 5 seconds, I can send a death threat to someone. Whereas I think, when I started in journalism, obviously we didn't have social media. So if someone wanted to object to something you write, they'd have to read the review. They would have to sit down, write a letter to the editor, put the letter in an envelope, put a stamp on it, send it in the post. There was and then the editor would have to read it. And, if the editor decided it was, non-threatening, it could go on the page, it would be. So there was a kind of process there, and there was a sort of a length of a sort of cooling off period, if you like, where people, if they got really het up about something, they would then have to spend the time, to work out what they wanted to say. Whereas now I think we're so sort of frantic and in the moment that people send, sometimes it's tweets they don't mean. But yeah, it's an odd thing. And here's the thing: I'm a guy. I don't get anywhere near the amount of abuse that female critics get when, if female colleagues of mine who didn't like Tenet particularly, they got so much more abuse than I did, and much more hateful and actively actionable abuse. So, you brush it off, you shrug it off. So actually, sometimes people come to me on social media and they make a point, they disagree with me, and they make a point that I hadn't realized, and I go, oh, actually that's a very good point, because it's not like I have all the answers or my word is the final word. I always feel that those reviews, particularly the ones that are running in the week of release or on the opening weekend, are like the beginning of a conversation rather than the final word. This is a start point. Go and see it, see what you think, and then come back to me with your thoughts. But try not to be so abusive when you come back to it.
But
ideally, in an ideal world.
Yeah, actually that's the thing. Like, this happened to me once more also. Like, I was like all pumped up with the new Quentin Tarantino film. Like, even I read the review of Peter Badshaw's, he reviewed the movie in Cannes, and like he gave all 5-star rating, and all. I read the review, but like when I watched the movie in theaters, I'm like I wasn't satisfied about the film, and the movie didn't work out for me. But like, I don't know why, but it's like it happened. But like Quentin Tarantino is like one of my favorite directors working in the industry. But like this was like for me his one of his weakest films. But I know. But yeah, so this happened, and like people were saying, oh, saying that, oh, he is Quentin Tarantino. You don't know you don't know him, and like you are making a mistake. Like just analyze it properly and all that stuff. They were saying to me, but like I said that in my first viewing, I didn't like it, and that's it. Like, what can I say? That is the perception of people.
And it's often, weirdly, it's almost always the case that it's male filmmakers that inspire this sort of slavish devotion, and it's usually it's generally male film fans who have this devotion, who want to be entirely enthralled to this great male filmmaker. You never hear Celine Sciamma filmmakers coming up to someone because they didn't like Portrait of a Lady on Fire so much. So yeah, I mean it's one of the many strange things about the modern world. I'm just hoping things will calm down a little bit and get a little bit, calmer, and we can have a proper conversation rather than just sort of endlessly shouting at one another.
But yeah, this is the thing I wanted to ask you. Like, after all this, why is film criticism like important?
I think it's more important than ever. I mean, one of the things that's become apparent, particularly over the last year since lockdown. At the beginnings of lockdown in the UK last year, which was March here, cinema shut and everything went on streaming. And for the first couple of weeks, there were only sort of 3 or 4 things out every week. You know, the big summer blockbusters all got pushed back or cancelled or rerouted or whatever. But increasingly, as the year went on, more and more stuff appeared on streaming. And, you know, I don't know if you've ever studied the Netflix menu or the Amazon Prime menu. It's almost impossible to find stuff on these things. So I think, you know, ideally, you're looking to read a roundup of stuff that's out this weekend that sorts the stuff that's worth a try, or the stuff that's interesting but a little bit flawed, or, you know, the stuff that's just worth taking a gamble on, from the stuff that's not worth touching with a barge pole, you know, the stuff to steer well clear of. And I think, you know, as more and more stuff appears on streaming, and certainly over the last 6 months, more and more stuff has come onto the official UK release schedule through streaming. You need someone to sort of, you know, pick through and sort the wheat from the chaff. And so I think that's you know, one of the sort of useful things that we can do. You know, we can suffer through some terrible film so as to warn people not to go anywhere near it. But equally, we can point to a small film that's not had any publicity, that doesn't have a publicity budget, that isn't being put on the side of buses or billboards or whatever, and say, you know, look at this. It doesn't look like very much, but once you're sitting there watching it, it's one of the most transformative experiences of the year, or whatever you're going to say about that smaller film.
Like a festival film.
Yeah, exactly. I think, you know, that you know, the festival movies always, you know, they need champions, they need cheerleaders or something like that, just to build a bridge between the film and the filmmaker and the general public. I think that's a sort of useful thing. And I think actually criticism is at its best when it has that kind of public service. You know, that it's not just me giving my opinions, it's me sharing something with you and starting a conversation that we can have over the course of the days and weeks to come once you've been and seen it.
Oh wow! So, just like in this age of social media, where like in Facebook, if you have a page, just like for example, if you have a page like Sanket Mistry reviews, these are like this is for just example. So, these are like any random person who is reviewing a movie. My point was like, and also my question was, what, like, how does a professional review stand out to these kind of Facebook pages or reviews?
Well, hopefully, ideally, we've seen a lot more movies. You know, I've been doing this for 20 years professionally now. I would have been doing it for it's all getting on for 30 years, you know, professionally, and,
Wow.
and before that as kind of an amateur making notes and everything. So, you know, I hopefully have a lot of information up here, and comparison points and things like that. So I can sense when a film is doing something original or when it's, you know, falling back on old cliches or whatever. It's that level, I hope, of knowledge, and I think, you know, we can hopefully bring that to our reviews. And I think sometimes we put too much knowledge in, and that can be equally alienating. You've got to get the balance right, not assuming that everyone who reads your stuff knows your reference points. But yeah, you want a critic who's got a sort of wide frame of reference, who keeps an open mind. I think that's you know, particularly useful. And, you know, hopefully on top of all that, the writing should be good. And I think, you know, a lot of you know, I mean, even I have sort of days when my writing is not entirely 100%. It's not as I would like it to. I think every writer has, you know, we have certain days where everything is flowing and we're writing gold with every word, and then other days where it's, you know, excrement coming out of our pen or whatever. But yeah, you would want the professional critic to be able to formulate an argument and express it well, and be readable in that sense. And yeah, I think that's a key factor as well.
So, like, we just talked a lot about film criticism and film appreciation also. Like, I just wanted to divert this conversation to a film you recently talked about in my recommendation video, Run Lola Run. So, you talked about that. You kind of had an idea about like watching the movie, like letting the audience watch the movie in three different theaters. simultaneously, not simultaneously, but one after
Yeah,
another.
yeah. So the idea was to schedule it so you could watch, because Run Low Run is a sort of 3-act movie, and it involves the heroine running from A to B. So you could start the same film with a 20-minute delay in 3 cinemas that was sort of equidistant, and I think that would be the tricky part, to try and find 3 cinemas that are almost exactly the same distance apart. And so you would watch the first part in cinema A, you would then have to run 20 minutes to get to cinema B. You would then have to run 20, and I mean, obviously from a health and safety perspective, it's never going to happen because people will be collapsing in the streets and I will be responsible for the deaths of thousands. But that would have been, in terms of immersive, we have this thing called Secret Cinema over here, which is a very contentious and controversial organization who basically occupy public spaces like old swimming pools or old car parks, and stage screenings of old movies. So I think in recent years they've done things like Dirty Dancing, but they've done up the swimming pool or the car park like an old 1960s dance club. And there are actors playing, dancers and things like that. And you go in, you go into this immersive world, and then you sit and watch the movie at the end of it. But yeah, that was my contribution to immersive cinema, to get people running around cities in homage to Run Lola Run. Yeah.
Oh, wow. To wrap this up, I wanted to ask you one final question. So, when you watch a film, what all things do you check? What all things does one film have to do to become a great film according to you?
I don't know if I have a checklist. And I think checklists are quite dangerous things when it comes to criticism, because not every film is geared towards doing the same thing. So some things would check certain things off and some things wouldn't. I also think there's a sort of danger with checklists that your worldview gets too prescriptive, that a film has to be seen to be ticking certain boxes. And for me, I try to sort of keep an open mind when I'm going in. I mean, I think I'm quite sort of story based. I kind of want a good story to hook me in and pull me through and sort of spit me out at the end feeling like I've been told a good tale. I think that's just the tradition that I've grown up in. I think, I'm so used to reading and having stories read to me as a child or whatever, that I've always looked for a good story. But equally, I'm very happy, watching an avant-garde and experimental thing that has no narrative whatsoever. One of the fun little crazy films that came up on streaming last year when all the cinemas were shut was a sort of 40-minute sort of mid-range film by the British artist and filmmaker Ben Rivers called Now at Last, where he basically set up his camera to watch a sloth, the animal, the furry animal, climbing up a tree for 40 minutes. And of course, sloths are notoriously slow, so he takes a while and he stops and then he moves on. I guess there's a kind of story there, but equally, I was utterly transfixed for the whole 40 minutes because I was genuinely nervous that the sloth was going to fall off or that something was going to come into the frame or something else like that. So it's not strictly a narrative thing. I just want to be caught up in something. I just want to be swept away. And by and large, if I am looking for something, if I am looking for a horror movie to scare me or, a romantic comedy to sweep me off my feet, I actually want to get to a point where I'm not actually thinking about my checklist or whatever it is that I want something that sort of goes beyond my expectations, in life as in movies, I guess.
But just to wrap this up, just one last question. So, apart from the 3 films you just talked about in the recommendation video, apart from them, what are the 3 your favorite films which comes to your mind? Which are those films? Which would be those films? If
This
you can.
This is the big question. I sense it was all leading up to this, wasn't it? I bet you so many of your interviewees go, "Oh my god, I can't believe you asked me this." I mean, it's quite tough, but there were some things that always sort of float up to me when people ask me this. I think Magnolia, Paul Thomas Anderson, we mentioned earlier, what I love about that film is that it's almost like 20 movies in one. So, you go in for one movie and you get another 10 or 15 movies simultaneously. So I love that movie greatly. Once Upon a Time in the West, the Sergio Leone Western, which I think I watched when I was very young at my grandparents' house, and it sort of stuck with me ever since. My grandfather was a huge fan of Westerns, so yeah, I watched a lot of Westerns as a kid. And actually going back to that film as it's been reissued and brought out on DVD, every time I go back to it, I'm just amazed by the sweep and the scope of it. It's a proper movie, I think. We mentioned Run Lola Run. I quite like, there's a very odd sort of classic era American studio movie called The Fountainhead, which is based on the Ayn Rand novel, which, the Ayn Rand novel, which I plowed through as a teenager and is completely batty. It's about 1,000 pages long. It's like a brick of a book. And it's full of Ayn Rand's crazy batshit political ideas. But they made a movie out of it with Gary Cooper, which is one of the most eccentric studio movies that you'll ever see. I mean, I think when you go to that sort of classic 1940s American studio movie, you expect to see certain things. Fountainhead is just bonkers. I mean, it's visually kind of striking. It's about architecture, and it has the sort of grand sets that you would expect from a 1940s studio movie. But yeah, in terms of how it's sort of shot and how the narrative and it's full of odd stuff. And I always kind of like movies that come from the mainstream but do very odd stuff. Those are my movies. I think I'm probably a bit mainstream and a bit odd as well. So I think that's where we connect.
Wow. So thank you so much for doing this. It was a pleasure having you talk about cinema in general and also film criticism. And actually, I quite learned about the importance of film criticism in in this conversation by you. So thank you so much for doing this conversation, sir.
Thank you for having me. It's flown by. It's been an absolute joy.
Thank you so much and goodbye.
See you soon.